hope you can all hear me. I'm sure a lot of you have been suffering with something in this weather. So I've got lots of liquid. I hope my voice just holds out. So thanks for coming. And I'm just going to tell you about the timings of this talk. Well, I don't know exactly, so I didn't practice it to the minute. But I'm going to kind of open it up a bit at the end. So I don't want this to be just a talk. I'll probably leave a 5-minute break at some point, maybe actually just at the end, so people can formulate questions and actually not even just questions, anything you want to say, and I'll flag up points that I'd like to hear from you all about during this presentation. So yeah, I'll leave quite a lot of time for QA at the end. So I'm going to be talking about personality. I'm going to start talking about research, a little bit of background on personality itself, and then a bit about design. So I am a researcher, so I'm not going to try to talk about design too much, and that's going to be more of the open question to you all. So first of all, who knows why this image is related to personality? Hands up. Just put that in there as an enigma. So I'm just going to start off by setting the scene. I've done about 3 or 4 talks, and I don't really recognise many people in this audience. So anybody seen any of my other talks? Cool. What I've noticed from attending talks is that there's a real range of UX talks. So it could be a very, very specific talk on how to use something, or all the way to the other end of the spectrum of meaning of life. You may have seen some all good stuff, both really useful, and my talks have, through no design of my own, but they just happen to fall about there. So just to set the scene, I'm going to try not to stray too far this way. And I'm happy to say I've seen a lot of talks from a broad range of backgrounds. So I use design as a very loose term, so I include research in that. Really, we're all designers. Doesn't matter what our job title is, but I'm a psychologist, and so I'm going to talk about some psychology today. I'd really like, actually, yeah, another hands up if your particular background or interest is not listed there. No one? Okay. Expecting more. It'd be great to hear. It'd be great to hear how people's backgrounds have influenced their approach to work. So design and UX is still taking shape, and it's a very broad discipline, and I'm always advocating bringing in more fields to the arena. I think that's really important for the future of tech, as it plays a bigger part in our lives. We need a lot of different angles looking at it. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about psychology. I don't want this to turn into a lecture, but this is the kind of the backdrop. So behaviorism is a kind of ongoing debate in psychology. And the debate is, do we care what happens in the middle here? If X is something that is stimulus, something in the environment, Y is the response, the behaviour. Do we actually care what happens in the middle? You might think that's what psychology is about, but some disciplines and methods don't tend to focus on that. It's very much X resulted in Y, and we can keep tweaking that. So the closest thing we do is A/B testing, for example. We don't really have to know why something will work better than something else. We just run some tests and result in a better outcome. So, my feeling on this, and this is, I should have a kind of warning on this slide that I'm going to try to predict the future of technology, which is really, really hazardous. But I believe that as technology kind of covers more aspects of our life, we're designing it to operate less visibly, so that don't make me think, that kind of principle, and it's becoming, or maybe is more powerful than us. So to sum up those three, the best term is pervasive, and I think that to return to behaviorism, we need to know more about ourselves, so what happens in the middle. Okay. So we had a little look into the future there. Let's just give a very brief history of personality. So I'll just kind of just frame that. We're thinking about knowing more about people, which is really what design research, user research is about. The psychological angle of that is just one angle, and personality is just one element of that. And that's what I'm going to focus on today, just because I've noticed that it just doesn't come up very much in any of our tools and methods. So this picture from slide 1, this is the earliest example of how we as a species has tried to define temperament and personality. And I just thought it was very interesting because they got a few things really right. The four liquids are blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. And the idea is that these things we have, these liquids inside us, physical things which produce a temperament. And they said everyone's unique. We've got a unique balance of all four. And also it started a kind of nature-nurture debate because people, even though this is inside us, it's affected by the environment, so literally food coming in and changing the composition of this. So that was the first attempt. Sanguine means sort of literally kind of spirit, so air. Outgoing, social, positive. Choleric, literally fire in your belly, is ambition and achievement, and melancholic, very self-explanatory, kind of earth. I don't really know what the link was with water and phlegmatism, but that's more a bit more detached and wise in some ways. So the idea is these are personas. These are the earliest personas, probably. And we're actually a mix of all these, so it's not like you have to pick one. So, fast forward several millennia and get to 20th century psychology. There's tons of models out there for personality. Who's taken a personality test before? Cool. Who's taken one for work? Cool. That's one more. Whose work has actually put that test to use in some way? Cool. Good to know. So I should mention there's a bit of a treacherous history with psychometric testing, which is what the tests want to measure. People have misused it very much, tried to use it in recruitment to try to get the best workers, and it was very misused. But since then, we've had a kind of 50, 70 year period. This one particularly, I'm just going to use this one today, it's called the Big Five. This is fairly agreed upon by psychologists, and psychologists do argue a lot about a lot of things. And they pretty much agree that this is a good predictor for behaviour. There are some caveats to that, but overall, I'm gonna share my scores on this. So I'll just say how it tends to work. So most of you know, you've got loads of questions, and it's a self-reported thing. So you say, I agree or disagree with the statement of, I like to try new things for ages. So you can all read the descriptions here. Sorry. So it's if you're interested in doing another test after this talk, I will say that the biggest problem is the self-reporting nature, and people will think of their ideal selves, or they may just not be very self-aware. And I'd say try to catch yourself at the most honest moment, and then just go through all the questions at once. There's a really good way that this is calibrated, so the questions should elicit an even spread of responses across everyone who answers it, and if not, they change the question. So, this is me. So I said there are some problems with this, with predicting behaviour. I think if anyone walks in the room right now, they wouldn't guess that the person at the front of the room was 7 on extroversion scale. This is low to high, by the way. So there are some complications. Obviously, we're not we can't be defined by 5 numbers. But we have a sort of everyday persona. We have maladaptive personas. We come up with strategies to just cope in the world, and we can be quite surprising. There's overall correlations between specific behaviours, activities, and these 5 scales. I tried another test, and they produce all sorts of diagrams here. You can see it's fairly similar to the picture it's painted at me from the other one. So this is how that particular test just explains that that variation between what you might see on the scales and what you might see in real life. So going back to tech trends, having seen that, I'm going to try to persuade you that we should understand things at the personality level, so the cognitive level, rather than just a behavioural level. Because of these trends, and just because of different types of products which I want to. So I'm going to just run through personas for a sec. Who uses personas? Who likes personas? Who's, so I guess I should just mention sort of why researchers might create personas. So one more hands up, sorry. Who uses jobs to be done framework? Okay, cool. Just wondered. They're kind of presented as one or the other, but you can use both. So why do we create things like personas? The basic idea is that we're trying to design for everyone, but you're going to have thousands, millions of users, so you literally can't know everybody. It's a proxy to say here are the archetypes that cover broadly the behaviours that we're designing for. So the numbers of personas you see are between 3 and 10 maybe. We can't remember that much. And if you can distill information about people, varied as it is, into these posters, then everyone can get a sense of difference between people, and they can read their backstories, and the idea being that it builds empathy. So this is from Nielsen Norman. It's it's comparing just kind of jobs to be done list, where it's just what do people want to do, and then what the constituents of that, versus these personas. So it's not just demographics, but things like some information at the top and a backstory. That's really good just to remember the person, think of them whenever you make a design decision, and hopefully thinking about the range of them will get you some way to inclusive design, essentially. So there are some things that bug me about these, though. I would recommend these. I have recommended doing them a lot, but there are a few things about them. This is a kind of example one, persona by the Nielsen Norman group on their blog. So they kind of think this is very good. These scales, I don't really see how it helps you to know that people are in the middle of the scale. So multi-device use, yes, it's very good to consider that. Does your product of design work when someone's not giving it full attention? They could be using any number of screens. All of those scales, it's interesting to think about, but really you should just think about the extreme ends, and that should cover it. I mean, there's no reason why Amy or any director of financial advising should be a certain point on the multi-device use scale. It will be across the whole scale. So a proposition here is that when we use things on scales, it's useful to look at the extreme ends. And the big 5 personality scales, you've got 5 scales with 2 ends each. So you could theoretically think about different types of people by just thinking about the extreme ends of personality. And you could do that with any product. How are we doing for time?
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay, here we go. So I'm going to talk a tiny bit about product. As I said, I'm not a designer, I'm a researcher, so I'm not going to go too far with this, but I'm just going to flesh out a little bit of these ends of the scale. So I should say, one thing I forgot earlier was the other reason why I think there's a bit of nervousness in general using this bit for anything is that we tend to make judgments about these personality types, and the point of the scale is not to attach any kind of moral judgment to these things. So we might think, just to use the one I scored highest on, introversion at that end. Solitary, is that a bad thing? It's actually, all of these things are actually very useful. So I picked this image because actually it has all of them the same way around. So it goes low to high. Neuroticism is often actually flipped. And it's often just because it's got negative connotations. If you read the descriptions of them, you'll see what I mean. But from a psychologist's point of view, there's absolutely no difference between any of these descriptions. So we need to be neurotic. We need to be disagreeable sometimes. It's good to have a mix of introversion and extroversion. We need to be even low in conscientiousness. So that sounds like something we're all trying to be as conscientious, but actually we need all of these in the mix. So yeah, I was quite pleased when I came across this one, just laying them all out, and nothing particularly negative on there. So what's this got to do with design? Okay, openness has a very high correlation with people who blog. So it's pretty high. It's like over 0.8, which is turns out to be pretty high. So if we're thinking about a system where people are essentially exposing themselves to other people by revealing personal things in blogs or vlogs or any platform that's got anything to do with other people being social, a lot of these things are going to come into play. So how do you ensure that people who are less open to experience still have a propensity to use your product? This is a kind of funny one. I'm going to ask for the hands up again. Sorry. Who's got a to-do list app which they really they really like. So I've got a colleague who spent over £100 on different to-do list apps, and he said he couldn't find one that actually worked for him. And I think they're really tricky things. If you were to just write a couple of user stories about the to-do list app, probably say, okay, user needs to tick off a task and then add a task and then feel good when you get to the end of it. And how we actually use to-do list systems in our lives is really, really complex, and we often don't get to the bottom of them. We do too much. We get frustrated even though we're in charge of it. But the point is, it's not just for organised people who need to-do lists in their lives. Everyone needs to try to get things done, and the low-end conscientiousness scale is something we should be designing for. I'm not going to claim I know how to do that, but it's something to think about. I'll kind of rush through these ones. Introverts. How do you ensure that they're going to like your product? If there's anything to do with social interaction or well, I guess meetup groups and or just online social media. Entertainment. So we know things, for example, extroverts have a higher threshold to kind of find things exciting. So colours, lights, movement. Actually, in terms of interface design, what's the level that we're going for? It's actually going to depend on this scale. Agreeableness. Think about online discourse and the interesting factors that play there. And neuroticism. I've worked on a couple of fairly high consequence applications. So, I mean, an online process you go through, say applying for a visa, more and more is being put online, and we're expecting people to make pretty quick decisions. So I've had many people in usability tests really blame themselves for anything that looks like it's going wrong or making wrong decisions, really catastrophizing about doing the wrong thing. So when we take something and put it online, should we ever be putting high consequence things online only? Because by doing that, we're taking away that comfort of having another human somewhere in the process that can reassure you, or you can sort of offload to. So taking that responsibility all on you when you do these things online. Something to think about, especially for this end of the scale. So, okay, this section, I think I'm gonna whiz through these, and then we'll have a kind of break, and you can kind of formulate questions or come speak to me or amongst yourselves, and then we'll have more of a discussion. So when we talk about personality and design, I just wanted to make a distinction of personality of a product, and that's been talked about a lot. So branding, from from Clippy there to the MailChimp, so it's a famous case study of branding, so adding personality to a brand. So that's been going on a while, and it's fairly developed. But I think this products reacting to our personalities is something that's on the horizon. So we're going to have sort of a revolution in personalized tech. Personalization is, that was a buzzword ages ago, but it just meant really customization. But things like machine learning coming in, the technology is there to really respond to us and get to know us individually. So we've got this is the companion toy seal. Do you know this? Puro, there's others. I think by the time we're all a bit older, these will be fairly commonplace. We will look to machines for companionship and entertainment. So personalization is going to come back, and this is in the future bit. So if you don't agree with these premises, then I'll lay them out for you. But if you do, then all these trends in technology should mean, in my view, that we should understand more what happens in the middle there. Okay. Cool. So we threw a lot of things there. We started with everybody's unique view on design, and said you don't have to ask a question, but if you want to just stand up and state what that is, and in the future maybe do a talk around that. Then we went to, are we behaviorists? So this is really just an open question. Should we, what situation should we just take that behaviorist route of here's what we did and here's the response? Should personality be something that we make sure we're capturing in research? So if you do a kind of discovery or early testing with a bunch of people, you should aim for a range of people. Should personality be one of those ranges? And then should they make their way into personas or just as tests? So what do we think about it? In your day-to-day work, do you see any viability to that, where somebody could play the role of being at any end of any of those scales and come along and critique what you're doing according to that? And then left the design one fairly open. I'd love to hear some thoughts, especially just what's going to happen in the near future with personalization 2.0, or any other trend that you think is more relevant. So thank you. I don't know how long I took there, but I want to take a kind of 5-minute break, and then it's going to be a bit experimental. I don't really want to be trying to answer all the questions, so maybe it will be people answering each other's questions. But we'll see what happens. So yeah, thanks. Actually, I did talk to a personality researcher, and he says that UX and design should just go its own way, and not follow as we do with lots of other things, we don't really have to abide by sort of scientific rigor at 80. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. So the Big Five is a good place to start because it's agreed upon, but we could go our own way and decide on our own frameworks.
There's some sort of journey mapping as well. You can kind of map people's journey through a product, and then kind of a layer under that you can have emotional journeys, so that they're logging in and it's kind of they can be frustrated and get stressed.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, it is.
I guess when you do a mental model, so the mental mapping, that's exactly you do the customer journey, but under which state and which situation you're in, you could do the mental mapping of the customer journey or different customer journeys.
Yeah. So sometimes it sort of drives the journeys.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a layer.
Yeah.
I'll bring up the last slide again, so we can carry on.
So just an observation that I don't think I've ever used personality in design, but in usability testing, I think I've seen a lot of, not a lot, but a few times when personality has been really a big part of a particular session.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm thinking about it again because I think we've often set them as outliers. So I'm thinking, for example, of a woman who wanted to fill in a form to the end with dummy data, so she saw all of the steps before she then did her own. And someone who was were designing a flood warning system, and they wanted to see the river levels for themselves. They didn't want our interpretation of it. And those, we didn't do anything with those. We noted them, but I remember talking about them as, wasn't that amazing that that person wanted to do that?
Yeah.
We didn't then, well, I think we had the time because we were designing for the middle.
Yeah.
So we were picking up, people couldn't actually use the product, so we were fixing that. But those came through quite strongly.
Yes.
From, I guess, we only got ashamed because I saw those as extremes, but they're just people.
Yeah, that's you never know what you're going to find in usability testing. But yeah, it's hard to act on everything. You don't even know what the conversation would be if you tried to tackle that I guess attitude towards getting a form. Like how would you change the design? Did you get that far, or did you just?
No, because it was only out of maybe in the total of the project, lots of sessions. It was the only time we saw it.
Yeah.
But
when I tested with lawyers, and the way they used a marketing site was just completely ignoring everything and going straight to all the small print no one else ever looked at, and they all just said like, okay, but they were all reading way more small print than normal people. So then they said, this is the real stuff. This is the only stuff I can trust. Everything else is kind of marketing. This one you get very unexpected reactions. So anyone else?
Yeah, I just had a question around using personality segmented research.
Yeah.
I think the challenge with that would be that the typical Myers-Briggs, for example, is a big battery of questions, which is not very pleasant to take, as you say, it's not very reliable. So I guess the question is, how can we do it if we don't have a good way to segment? If you're screening someone, you don't want to ask them 60 questions.
No, and I asked a firm that recruits people for these things, and they said even asking them to take that 5 minutes one-off thing for all the studies they have, that would be too, you wouldn't get a good conversion. So it's tough, but say if you have a longer term study, if you were doing like a live release of pull like early adopters, I think there's a case for making sure you've got a good spread. Anyone else want to?
So you suggested to use personality in personas. Could you give us an example of when having that personality in a persona actually influence your design decision and help you basically design better?
Me personally. So I've tried to use this to say, so it depends if you are working on, I think I want to include this bit, rush through it. Depends if you're working on something which is essentially not for a target market, it's for everyone. And my suggestion there is that you'd use those as tests, rather like if you've seen those set of glasses you can get to try to see what it's like to have various visual impairments. Basically a version of that where you can pretend to be a certain personality for a minute. So just use that as a test. But if it could be the other way around, where you look at this from a product proposition point of view, where you say, okay, how do we design social media for introverts? Or you could look at types of product versus personality and find your target market. So I've mainly been working on products that don't have a specific enough market. So I've been trying to use those as quick tests. No good example for you there, so.
Yeah, kind of riffing on that now, I guess. But I guess the challenge is always that, from my perspective, is that the collection of behaviours and goals and whatever objectives and persona, unless they're a specific type of product like that, are rarely going to correlate with specific personality profiles. You'll just get a mulch of load of them, and that's where the actual challenge of making useful design decisions from these profiles comes.
Yeah. I think I'd agree with that. At most stages of design, perhaps it's more at the discovery stage of the anyone else point on that one, or raise anything else? We are free to just mingle and use this room as well. Taking any questions. Okay, right,
Thank you.